Welcome back to Through the Ringer. I'm still your host, Tate Frazier. I'm still here, and I'm here with Kevin O'Connor. And KOC, when we bring you on the show, we ask you to power rank things. I know it's a tough task. It's tough to put together these power rankings. What can one man do with so much power? So I turned it over to you, and I said, who is the potential number one picks? Like, who is in the group that could be there? There's probably three names, so I wanted you to power rank those three names. So I tossed it over to you. Who are the potential number one picks in the 2024 NBA draft?
Well, it seems like all indications are right now that number one with the Atlanta Hawks will be Alex Sarr, a near
Mm.
7 foot center power forward, or Zachary Ricochet. Both of them are French prospects. Ricochet is more of a 3-and-D style forward. Sarr more of that versatile Swiss Army knife defender. And then I think there's a third one worth mentioning here that could kind of, disturb that French party there with Sarr and Ricochet. Donovan Clingan,
Wow.
UConn center, back-to-back two-time champion. All indications are that he is thriving in workouts right now. He's showing off an improved three-point jumper. We know when he was back in high school, he shot threes, albeit not very well at all. He did not shoot them at UConn. He fancies himself as a guy that can become a three-point shooter. I think if you're looking for somebody that could potentially, overcome Sar or overcome Ricochet as the number one pick, Klingon feels like a high floor, potentially a high ceiling guy that could be the guy that does that.
And sometimes winners translate. And Donovan Clingan won a championship 2 years ago. He won a championship this past season. One time he was a role player coming off the bench. This year he was their star center. So he's been able to win in different roles, which I think is something that could benefit him. As far as Clingan and some of the comps, I mean, you've heard people in these workouts coming out. I've heard Brooke Lopez thrown out. I've heard Brad Miller thrown out. And it's not to say that he's going to be your number one option. We're going to run plays for Donovan Clingan there in Atlanta. But you do get a nice cog and a nice starter and a big that is, we're in a league, right, that bigs are valued maybe more than ever, right, KOC?
For sure. I mean, he's 7'2", 280 pounds with a 7'7" wingspan. And he's only
Mm.
20 years old. And the way he improved from freshman year to sophomore year, maintaining production on a significantly higher minutes workload, he got better offensively. I mean, like, I think you look at Klingon, he was great defensively as a freshman, even better defensively as a sophomore, but offensively, he showed better passing, better interior scoring. So if you're considering the rate of improvement, maybe someday he does become a guy that you can throw the ball to and ask him to get a bucket for you out of the post. Maybe he does become a guy that can pick and pop and hit threes. And if that's what he is, maybe that's more valuable than Ricochet, who has been super inconsistent as a three-point shooter this year. I mean, he's below 70% from the free throw line. He had a long stretch where he hit nearly 50% of his threes, but also a long stretch where he was under 30% from three, which is closer to his career numbers where he's always been inconsistent. Or versus Sar, who highly versatile defender. I mean, there's no doubt about his defense. There's no doubt about some of his flashes as a creator at near 7 feet, but another guy who has never been a good shooter. And I think Klingon is the guy where there's a clear, very clear and obvious role for him, and that's rim protecting center who sets screens and rolls hard to the rim and rebounds. I think at a minimum, Klingon is going to be a really, really, really good five for you. It's just a matter of where the ceiling is, and that's where Sar and Ricochet are the theoretical higher upside players, which is why I think you're seeing the Hawks at one and then the Wizards at two look more favorably at those guys over Klingon.
And Klingon is one of those guys where he was hurt the entire year, so it was hard to get an evaluation of kind of where he stood right now. But as the season waxed on, he continued to get better and obviously goes and wins a national championship. It was a big reason for that. And went up against Zach Edey, who was 7'3", in case you missed it. So pretty good stuff there. Do you have any comps? I started calling it the combine, not the combine, because there's just comps being thrown out all over the place. Bronny James was getting a whole lot of them. But for Ricochet, the ones that I heard, KOC, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I heard Tobias Harris. That was one. I heard Harrison Barnes. That was another name that was thrown out there. I heard Michael Porter Jr. Was there someone that you see in Ricochet that you compare to?
I mean, in my draft guide, I have Michael Porter Jr. there. I'm going to remove that and plug in Tobias Harris.
There you go.
That's a much better one. That's a very good
There
comparison
you
for
go.
Ricochet,
Right.
where it's a lot of theoretical upside with Ricochet that I'm not totally sold on. So yeah, I like the Tobias Harris comp. That's a good one.
And Alex Sarr, in case you missed it, his brother Olivier played at Wake Forest, played at Kentucky. He is in the OKC Blue Thunder organization right now. So you have another Sarr brother out there. That is good news, when it comes to the Antetokounmpos, the Wagners, right? There's a lot of brother combos out there that you can make work. So maybe some team is trying to get Olivier and they bring Alex in and they get the whole Sarr family. So I like that. The power ranking, the potential number one pick, Sarr is the leader in the clubhouse right now. Let's do some headlines that are out there. KOC, the Cavs decided to fire JB Bickerstaff after 5 seasons. A little bit shocking, I guess, but now the Cavs are trying to figure out what their future looks like. There's a lot of questions about Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland. What were your thoughts when you saw the news about Bickerstaff?
Typical. I mean, we see this across the league, whether it's the Lakers, the Suns, and now the Cavs. Teams kind of, pinning it on the head coach for some of the team's underwhelming seasons that they had, not reaching expectations. It's hard to expect Bickerstaff to do a lot with a roster that was completely depleted in the series. However, I think you got to look back at the regular season at the process of this team, and you could blame one of two people. You could blame Bickerstaff for not maximizing the talents of some of the guys on the roster, or you could look at the front office and say, well, you handed him a team with too much overlap, too small guards, too non-shooting bigs, not enough wings and forwards. Truth is blame needs to be deferred anywhere to everybody in the Cavs organization. And ultimately, it seems like this choice was more about, do they believe in him to be the guy to elevate this team moving forward? From an X's and O's perspective, there were times he was underwhelming this year, and maybe that's where you need to go in addition to making roster changes, because just changing the head coach isn't going to be enough for the Cavs. They need to make some changes to the roster.
And if Donovan Mitchell stays in Cleveland and you have Evan Mobley, there are pieces there. Jared Allen will be a hot commodity. OKC has been rumored to have interest there. So, there are moves to be made in Cleveland. And like you said, there's some guys that are there for the storm, and there's some guys to reap the rewards of the storm. You know what I mean? We all know the Mark Jackson, Steve Kerr situation, right?
For sure. And ultimately that game 5 that Mobley had against Boston, where he had 33 points on 15 made shots, 24 attempts. Mobley, for all the ups and downs that he had throughout the season, he did show some serious flashes in the moments that Jared Allen was not out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the Cavs moving forward, I've been a Mobley skeptic because of his offense at times. There's no doubts about his defense, but I've been a Mobley skeptic because of the inconsistencies on offense and the lack of a reliable three-point jumper. But what he showed in that game 5 against Boston, if that's a sign of things to come, Cleveland's got to think about optimizing that guy and moving Jared Allen for a better fitting front court piece next to Mobley, because that's going to be the key for them to take the leap, is your number 3 pick 3 years ago becoming the star that you hope for.
I love that, and I'm happy for Mobley. I am a Mobley guy. I've always believed, but like you said, we needed to see that offensive progression. And honestly, at times this season, it looked like regression, unfortunately, for him, but looked good in the playoffs. Let's talk about another team that's looking for a head coach, and now they're going to be in competition with the Cavaliers, it seems like, at least for one of those candidates. We talked about this last time you were on the show, the Lakers. I think the longer that the Lakers wait, right, KOC, more signs point to JJ Redick, because they're going to wait until the playoff coverage is over for him. What are your thoughts on what's next for the Lakers, and where do they sit right now?
We'll see. They seem to be dragging their feet a little bit with making the head coach decision, unless it's already been made and they're just waiting, as you said, for the finals to be over and to hire JJ after that. JJ would be so interesting. Because I think JJ, if he does get hired by the Lakers, you've got like Udonis Haslem, a former teammate of LeBron, saying how it would be a locker room that doesn't have trust. But at the same time, JJ is somebody who, he is meticulous, he is hardworking, he is driven, he is somebody who's a major competitor. He clearly has a good relationship with LeBron James for LeBron to be willing to do a podcast with him. Maybe JJ actually does have some good coaching qualities, and I would be very intrigued to see what he could do with that roster. But as Bill Simmons said to me on his podcast earlier this week, doesn't matter who's coaching that team, because look at the way the West has improved. What are the Lakers going to do to be able to close the gap with Denver, Minnesota, OKC getting even better next year? The Spurs, if they accelerate around Victor Wembanyama, like, what does it really matter when it comes to contending? Well, I mean, I guess we'll also see what the Lakers could have up their sleeves with their 3 first-round draft picks they're able to deal moving forward. They could get creative as well to try to get things going here. Because I'll tell you what, they're still one of the only teams that had 2 players named to an All NBA team, with LeBron James, who's still a top 10 player, and Anthony Davis, who just played the best basketball of his life. So there's still a chance for the Lakers. So I do think it matters. I don't totally agree with Bill there. I still think they could have a window here, but it's all going to depend on, again, it's not just about the coach. It's about what does the front office do. I'm always a GM first guy. To me, it's about what the GM and the front office does. So what are they going to do to surround LeBron and AD properly moving forward?
And what are they going to do to entice someone to really want that job that has the pedigree, right? I mean, Budenholzer is already off the books, right? He's going to Phoenix, right? There's only a certain amount of coaches. Vogel just got fired, and he obviously was there before. He's not going to be one of those guys. But there's a small group of guys that can get hired that have that pedigree. Unless you look across town at Ty Lue and try to entice him to come coach the Lakers. I don't know if that's something that's in their back pocket that they may try to do. He did go to the birthday party that Darvin Ham was not invited to. KOC. I don't know.
Isn't that something else? Darvin Ham doesn't go, but Ty Lue does.
I try to read between the tea leaves. I also think another thing that's happening in real time, just reading between the tea leaves, it does feel like Chris Paul is now taking like the ESPN reps as if JJ Redick is basically picking his successor if he's going to step away to go into the basketball side of things. So Chris Paul is now going to be taking JJ's spot on ESPN. I'm just saying, I'm reading the tea leaves, KOC. It looks like things are trending that direction. I don't know. That's
It
just
is
how I
interesting, isn't it, that Chris Paul is getting those
Mhm.
reps? I think Chris Paul should, if I'm Chris Paul, I'd want to go to the Lakers as a free agent and try to win a championship with my boy LeBron James. Like those guys
Right.
have been friends for such a long time. He could be a great fit there with kind of his like, advanced style now. He's just a playmaker. He's not a scorer as much now. Can still hit some threes for you off the catch, but if I'm CP3, I want to run it with LeBron and try to go get an actual championship, man. They asked him during one of the halftime shows. He's like, how do you deal with the pressure at this stage of the playoffs? He's not the guy to ask. But if you're Chris Paul, I want
Right.
to be able to answer that question with a ring on my finger when I actually get in the broadcast booth and not be a guy who's fallen short throughout my entire career with some choke jobs along the way.
He could just become Charles Barkley 2.0, KOC. That could be the bit for the rest of his career.
Yeah,
Guys come
he's
on there
not
that have
funny.
won rings. Yeah, that's the real holdup. That would be the trouble there. But maybe he finds some sort of footing. We'll see what happens. He did say he was addicted to the NBA Finals, so if he's covering the finals, that will be able to feed his addiction a little bit, which will be good. Speaking of people covering the finals inside the NBA, all signs are pointing that next year would be the last year. Charles Barkley's talking about this. He said he might try to sign the guys to. He's already trying to figure out a coup to get the show to stay on the air, but we'll see what happens. Just from an NBA fan point of view, how much is that show a part of NBA conversation, and how much will we miss it when it does? Hopefully, fingers crossed, it doesn't leave, but if it potentially does.
I mean, unfortunately, all good things end at some point. So I think
Philosopher KOC, I like that.
I mean, it's just the truth. I mean, Charles has also talked about how Ernie Johnson at 67 years old, he could be somebody that retires. He could retire sooner than later. So maybe the show would have ended anyway, whether Turner got the rights or not. But ultimately, regardless of when it ends or if it ends, it's going to suck when it does, because that show has always brought laughs. It's always made you think. It's been 4 guys on that stage that have never been afraid to say what's on their mind. And they've always had my respect for that. They've always entertained and educated me. And so I would miss it very much. And I hope Charles Barkley is successful in getting those
Me
guys on,
too.
because he, Ernie, if he were to retire from TNT, maybe he'd be willing to do like a once a month stream on YouTube with
Hmm.
Charles Barkley and the production company and all that. Maybe they make it a once a month thing, or maybe it becomes a Netflix show, right? Where they do a once a month thing. I think there's other ways for them to still be in our lives as a foursome, even if it's not every single week on TNT. And so that's my hope, is that something even better comes from it. Because no matter what format those guys are in, they're still going to be awesome together. And so that's my hope, that something even better comes from it.
Yeah, KO cup half full right there. I like that. That is what we like to hear. And also, I think if anyone deserves a farewell tour, we've seen a lot. Kobe had one, obviously. Coach K had his famous farewell tour. Inside the NBA, they need a farewell tour. So if they have one last year, we need the full coverage. One last thing, KOC, before I let you go. I'm looking at mock drafts. I love looking at your mock draft, but Gavoni has put out a mock draft as well, ESPN, and he has Bronny James to the Celtics. Sal and I talked about this. What do you think? Celtics, just despite the Lakers, they take Bronny James at 54. What do you think about that?
It would be absolutely comical if that happens on
Great.
draft day. I mean, the NBA has moved to 2 nights for the draft, one night for the first round,
Wonder
one
why.
night for the second round.
Yeah.
That would be the moment of night two of the draft if the Celtics of all teams draft Bronny James. Because not only would you be trolling LeBron James, Bronny's father, you'd be trolling our boss, Bill
Yeah.
Simmons, who
Right.
I'm sure would go record an emergency podcast streaming live on YouTube and FanDuel.
Executive of the Year, Brad Stevens, is under attack if that happens.
Yes, he's going at Brad. Fire him. Get rid of Brad Stevens.
Oh man, that would be great. Kevin, you and Chris Vernon doing the mismatch. Last night you did it right after the playoff game. Where can we just plug that for everybody out there, and obviously the Ringer NBA Draft Show as well?
Chris Vernon and I recorded the mismatch every Monday night and Thursday night throughout the playoffs, throughout the entire regular season. Somehow in our 8th year, thank goodness.
It's
Been
the
a lot of
best.
fun.
No, you guys have a great time. We appreciate you coming on the show, KOC, and we'll have you back very soon to break down all that's happening in the playoffs. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Tate.
Of course. And on the other side of the break, we have the Ringer's very own Megan Schuster to break down everything F1. So stay there, and we'll be right back on the other side of the break.